a special edition of Charlie Rose.
The Islamic Republic of Iran is one of the most important countries in the Middle East. It shares a long border with Afghanistan and is otherwise geographically strategic. There was an Islamic revolution in 1979, then the taking of American hostages. In 1997, Mohammad Khatami was elected president of the country, re-elected in 2001. He is in New York at the United Nations for a speech, a visit to Seton Hall University, and conversations with other heads of state. In an exclusive American television appearance, he sat down with me this morning to talk about many things, including September 11th, the war against terrorism, Osama bin Laden, the Taliban, the relationship with the United States, and many other things. We began by talking about September 11th. Mr. President, let me begin by asking your reaction to the events of September 11th. As you sat in Tehran and watched television of what happened at the World Trade Center and at the Pentagon?
Allow me, under the current circumstances, in this day where terrorization has become prevalent in our societies, to begin my statement with the name of the Almighty God, He who gives us all peace of mind. The September 11 event was one of the ugliest forms of terrorism that has ever occurred, one of the most tragic ones. I am extremely sorry that many American civilians, including many other people from other nationalities, were victimized by the attack. Immediately after the attack, I expressed my sympathy and my condolences. Terrorism is the ugly phenomenon of our era. It jeopardizes religion, freedom, security, and peace. Humanity must mobilize to combat this ugly and terrifying phenomenon so that we can move towards a peace based on justice under which everyone can live. Once again, I'd like to express my condolences to all Americans, the great nation of America, and all those bereaved families. This has created a common sympathy which I share with the victims of this tragic event. And I think that if we can mobilize positively, this will be very effective in the aftermath of September 11. And perhaps through this mobilization, we can combat terrorism forever.
You have described it not only as barbaric, as you have so characterized it and spoken out so strongly against it, and even said it was anti-Islamic. So no one can say that the war against terrorism is a war against Islam.
Definitely not so. One must fight terrorism. We must all fight terrorism. Terrorism is against all humanity, and humanity must mobilize to fight it. Regretfully, to say that war against terrorism is a war against a civilization or a religion is actually a mistake, a big blunder that has happened. And I think, in fact, that there are very few people who'd like to speak in those terms. We must all mobilize to fight terrorism. However, whatever that needs to be said and questioned is in the nature of fighting terrorism.
A year ago, you called for dialogue among civilizations, and I want to talk about that in just a moment. But in this war against terrorism, is Iran, your country, with the United States in its battle in Afghanistan?
We believe that we have to also address the root causes of terrorism. Two things should be done. One is to fight the terrorist bases. The second is to address the root causes of terrorism, factors that lead to it. We believe that with wisdom, with foresight, we should approach the subject. We need a common consensus to fight it, and it is for this very reason that we have said that it should be done under the auspices of the United Nations with a clear definition, clear vision, and with wisdom and foresight. As we are concerned and saddened by what occurred in America, and we also agree that we should fight with terrorism wherever. But at the same time, we cannot hide our sorrow and sympathy for what is happening to the people of Afghanistan. We must express our sorrow and sympathy with them. We should not do things or resort to acts that would actually create sympathy for terrorists. So what we need to do is to also understand what the people of Afghanistan are going through, their sufferings and pains, so that the people in Afghanistan can also realize that the war is a war against terrorism and its root causes. And hopefully we can achieve this through common consensus.
And you engage in a war with the Taliban and search for al-Qaeda and Mr. bin Laden, and at the same time engage in a battle against terrorism roots and causes.
We basically do not welcome war in any form, although we believe that we need to mobilize worldwide to find the terrorists and bring them to justice in courts. And God willing, we can also address the root causes.
How would you get Mr. bin Laden, and how would you topple the Taliban without military action?
I believe that by making life harder for the terrorists, we can achieve some goals. Of course, we also need evidence against the terrorists so that we can bring everyone in charge of those heinous acts to justice. We're looking at the consequences of war today. The people who are said to be terrorists, and as you know, we have also suffered from terrorism, may still remain in power and where they are. And in fact, it is what we are doing is that we're seeing that the people are becoming the victims of war. So once again, I think we have to address the root causes with poverty, with discrimination. These are issues we need to address. And I really believe that a world consensus can be fed much strongly so that we can make life harder for terrorists.
You'd like to see the United States stop the bombing?
I hope that this will happen so that we will not see the pain and suffering of civilians more. And I hope that for the holy month of Ramadan, we will see that these bombardments are stopped. And we should just make life harder for terrorists, make it difficult, and fight against their bases.
But the United States would say we don't know how to do that without attacking them at the core, where they are in Afghanistan. They will continue to commit terrorist acts unless we stop them now in Afghanistan and topple the government that is giving them a safe haven, the Taliban. Or other lives will be lost.
Well, if we leave their hands open, that is the Taliban, no doubt they will resort to more heinous crimes, or the terrorists. But the question is, how do we tie their hands? I believe that to act quickly on these matters could lead to further terrorism. Again, the whole world has to mobilize so that terrorism and terrorists will have no place for their activities.
Many countries have mobilized, as you know, and are prepared to send troops and have offered help, including Muslim countries like Turkey. In 1998, your government, after Iranian diplomats were killed by the Taliban, amassed troops on the border of Afghanistan and threatened to take reprisal action. Yes?
Yes, it is correct. A number of our diplomats were killed. We were under a great deal of pressure. And given that Afghanistan is our neighbor, we had a lot of immediate threats. We were also immensely pressured by drug trafficking from that country. But although we were threatened, we refrained from waging war, and we had sent out warnings previously about the problem of Afghanistan, the problem of drug trafficking, the pain and suffering of the people there, but these warnings were overlooked. If they had not been overlooked, perhaps today we would not have faced what we do now.
Perhaps so, and many will say that if this war is successful, three things would happen. You'll stop the drug trafficking, you will stop the refugee issue, and that it will be better for Iran because it will have a friendlier government in Afghanistan. So those are three reasons beyond terrorism for your government to support this action.
Will the war lead to these results, or will the improvement of the situation in Afghanistan? No doubt, following the event of September 11, something positive has happened, which I hope will continue, and that is the world attention to the situation in Afghanistan. We must make every effort in the international community with all our might to restore government in Afghanistan based on the will of people that will guarantee security for its people, some government that will combat illicit drug cultivation and trafficking. And I hope that in the future we will witness stability and security in Afghanistan, leading to the formation of a government, a transitional government that will be representative of all ethnic groups in the country, that would pave the way for people to determine what the future should be, based on the free vote of the people of Afghanistan under the auspices of the international community. Such a government can create security both for us and for the world, God willing.
On that issue, your government and the United States have the same objectives, and even to perhaps do it under United Nations supervision.
We have had numerous negotiations in this field with the representatives and envoys of the Secretary General, as well as with the Secretary General himself, either by phone or in person. We have also, on various occasions, including in the 6+2 forum in Geneva, where the Americans have also participated, negotiated on this. So we hope that we can all reach a consensus that will be least harmful to the people of Afghanistan and lead to stability and security for the country.
Some are even arguing that this is an appropriate time and moment after the Taliban is defeated and after the terrorists are driven out of Afghanistan, Mr. bin Laden and al-Qaeda, that this will be an opportunity for for Iran to once again play an even more significant role in the world, to re-enter a foreign policy beyond your borders.
Afghanistan matters to us. We have a long border with Afghanistan, and as I have said, in previous years, we have had trouble in the area of drug trafficking. You know, Afghanistan is a base for producing drugs, illicit drugs, and this has also been harmful to the West. And also to us, you know that Iran has been the best transit route for drug traffickers to the West. We have lost thousands of our people, of our children, over 3,000, to fight drug trafficking. Therefore, the future of Afghanistan matters to us greatly, but we must make efforts that the government that is restored in Afghanistan will not be a coercive government, not one that will be put in place by force, but rather one that would be acceptable to all people, so that all the groups and the ethnic groups in the country will feel that they are participating in the government and in the administration of their country.
Including moderate Taliban?
Maybe it's not right for us to say what we think about that. We've had many problems with the Taliban. We believe that anyone who cannot guarantee the rights of the human beings and create more violence should not be the focal point for a government and for the activities of an administration. Those who believe in the rights of the people of Afghanistan, in security, in fighting terrorism and drug trafficking, are those that can naturally be present in the future government of Afghanistan and administering the country. And no doubt the world community, the international community, cannot accept to have people in place that actually create more violence, more social abnormalities, and more terror. If they don't have these characteristics and can support the people of Afghanistan and are at the same time accepted by the Afghan people, will also be supported by the international community.
Three things have been said and written about Iran's help, assistance to the war effort. One is that you have offered to help American servicemen in distress that might need Iran's help to save their life. Is that correct?
First of all, we have conveyed to the Secretary General of the United Nations that while our borders are closed to Afghanistan, we are fully prepared to give any humanitarian assistance that the international community and humanity deems necessary for the Afghan people. For this very reason, we have set up camps at the 0 point on our border in Afghanistan for the refugees and displaced people. We are administering the affairs there, and we are making every effort so that Afghan children will be able to complete their education. We are trying to provide schooling for them. And in fact, in agreement with the international community, our border is a border for humanitarian assistance and will remain so for the Afghan people. So it is quite natural that we have said we will not participate in war, because we believe that this war in this form will not benefit the United States either. And I hope that it will come to an end very soon. And at the same time, humanity will mobilize and will be encouraged to fight terrorism. No doubt, international conventions and regulations should be in place. We have said that if any harm comes to Americans with any problems, we will help them in accordance with these international regulations.
What should happen to Mr. bin Laden?
I say that whoever who carries out a crime against humanity and may possibly have resorted to terrorism should be brought to justice before a court in public, whoever that person is and wherever he may be.
And to the Taliban and to Mullah Omar?
Let us not talk about individuals. Let's talk about general matters. Whoever who commits a crime should be held responsible for that crime.
The United States has said in that context that
states that support terrorism are on the side of terrorism. Where does this battle go after Afghanistan?
We must make efforts so that war does not go in any other direction. We must form a consensus for peace, security, and stability the world over. This is possible, but we must agree on it. We must define terrorism. We must address the root causes of terrorism. We must address the question when it is taken advantage of at times. And we believe that killing civilians, innocent civilians, wherever it may happen, is a form of terror. But we cannot accept that when people are being pressured and suppressed and are making effort to support themselves, that should be labeled as terrorism. I believe that the international community, under the supervision of the United Nations, should reach a definition based on consensus of the concept of terrorism.
But clearly your country has been engaged in a war, a long 8-year war against Iraq. And there were civilian casualties, but you and your government believed that the survival of Iran was at stake. The American government believes the survival of the United States is at stake, so they must respond. Wherever terrorism is.
First of all, I believe that what happened was not only against America, but against all humanity. Therefore, all humanity must mobilize to fight this terrible phenomenon. What happened in America could happen anywhere in the world, as it had happened before in Iran. No doubt, the number of victims of terrorism in Iran over the last few years exceeds the innocent civilians, those innocent people who also were victimized by the tragic events of September 11. In addition, we have experienced narco-terrorism, bioterrorism. Many of our civilians, including Iraqi people, have been victimized by chemical weapons. And as you yourself have heard and know, in the West, it is said that the anthrax, in fact, may have come from Iraq into this area. But I want to say that before bioterrorism spread in the world, we were victimized by it ourselves. We hope that it will not spread around the world. It is natural that the world altogether understands that when a country is actually attacked so severely, it has the right to respond. And as I have said, terrorism is not confined to one place. It is against humanity at large. But what we are saying is that we need a global solution based on consensus and global agreement, some form of agreement that we can all understand and believe in. And if we can achieve that with foresight, we can also fight terrorism, and it shouldn't be difficult.
There have been reports that the Iranian people feel a deep sorrow about this. I'm talking about not the government, the people. That there's real support for the United States among the Iranian people in their sorrow and in their effort to do something.
چرا علائم آشکار عکس العمل ملت ایران رو
Why don't you mention the clear reaction of the nation of Iran? I think that I was one of the first presidents, or maybe the first president, that in a very short period of time after September 11 came out and spoke on behalf of the government and the people of Iran. I expressed my condolences. I said that the depth of the tragedy is unfathomable and that it has, in fact, touched the sensibility of all humanity, and we express our deep sorrow with the people of America for this tragedy. I hope that this feeling is generalized so that wherever terrorism is witnessed, everyone feels sorrow for the people who are victims of terrorism and feels pain about the acts of terrorism worldwide. I want to say that there is no problem between the nation of Iran and the nation of America. We respect the people of America. I also believe that Americans also respect Iranians. And we have seen cases of that in our people-to-people exchanges, in our cultural and sport exchanges. Differences are in political issues and in some historical areas should not overshadow the genuine feeling of nations towards each other.
But do we now have, as you have planned to say in your speech to the United Nations, an opportunity to somehow further bring the United States and Iran together?
I think that today, under the current circumstances, a matter that is more important than the political relations between Iran and the United States is an issue of concern to the international community, an issue which was witnessed on September 11, the act of terrorism committed that day, and an issue that has arisen further when we have moved to act against terrorism. So I hope that internationally, whether people are victimized or are threatened by terrorism, can cooperate and in the future together to move forward to fight against this ugly phenomenon based on consensus and agreements. This is really more important, and the United Nations should supervise these actions.
But you are the world's strongest proponent of a dialogue among civilizations. And you should, some say, be the proponent of a dialogue among nations. And that this is an opportunity to enhance the dialogue and bring two great nations who have had conflict together in order to work for the mutual benefit of their people. Dialogue.
You're talking about dialogue, and we're talking about the dialogue among civilizations. So allow me to go deeper into this subject to find out what we mean. The 20th century was a difficult century for humanity. In the first part of that century, we had 2 world wars. The losses and costs of those 2 wars by far exceeded the losses and costs suffered by humanity from the beginning of its existence until the beginning of World War II. All across the globe, we have seen civil strife, regional wars, and various forms of colonialism. So we have passed through a very difficult century. And regretfully, the war and terror machinery still continues in the current century. Never stopped. And even today, when we're talking about the dialogue of civilizations, there are many terrorist groups who terrorize their groups, their people in many parts of the world. In fact, one of the most moving events was what happened on September 11. I believe that this should change. And it can only change when the paradigm ruling the world community today is changed. What must change is the way we look at humanity, at mankind and its future. It was in this atmosphere that the issue of the dialogue among civilizations was mentioned. And many intellectuals, cultural people, many thinkers, scholars came together, and the United Nations and the international community agree that we should designate this year as the year for dialogue among civilizations. The very fact that we hear this in the world today is the need by humanity to hear this, that we need a dialogue of civilizations. No doubt there will be stronger theories that will be put forward, but not everything might work. But no doubt humanity did accept that we need a dialogue for civilizations because we need to change this paradigm. This dialogue can only succeed when several things are taken into consideration. First, a dialogue requires listening. You cannot just speak and accept the other person to accept what you speak. Listening is a verb, so I'd rather say to listen. To listen is to open your world into the world of another, to accept someone in our capacity, in our cup, and to open a dialogue. Dialogue is to reverse the current relation between politics and ethics. In the past, coercion was the ruling factor. Whoever who had more might and force would coerce the rest. But when we talk about listening, we need to be humble and be ready and embark on mutual respect. A third point for a new paradigm is that we need tolerance and restraint. When we talk about restraint, sometimes it could be negative. Sometimes we might ask someone to give up all their values, all their ways of thinking. But there's a positive way of talking about restraint, to say that while you can hold on to your values, you can also respect others and their values, and that you will be prepared to cooperate with them in order to solve problems. And this is what we mean by restraint in the positive sense. In the Oriental school of thought, this is a prevalent issue.
So when we talk about dialogue, I'm reminded of a verse from the Quran, quote, "Help one another in goodness and piety," unquote. Dialogue requires respect, tolerance, and positive restraint. The will to engage in cooperation so that with ethics and courage we can solve the problem. This goes far beyond political debates between two governments. We must change the mentality. And once humanity accepts to embark on mutual respect in order to form new ties, I have no doubt that political ties can also be improved then.
با دیگری رابطه برقرار بکنه مطمئن باشید که در عرصه‌های سیاسی هم روابط بهتری برقرار خواهد شد.
You said a lot. The United States, I would think, and the American people would respond affirmatively to everything you just said. Respect, despite clashes in the past, there is a genuine desire to move to the future, to take advantage of opportunities. And I think it is a position of this government to respect you and your government and the Iranian people, its values, its religion. At the same time, in its political positions, the United States asks that you understand their values and their ethics, and that you understand that their support and relationship to the government of Israel has been a long part of America's value and connection to people with deep bounds and connection and relationships among those two governments. And they ask you to respect that as well.
بگذارید اشاره‌ای بکنم به اونچه که در زمینه روابط سیاسی میان آمریکا و ایران وجود داره.
Relating to the political ties between Iran and the United States. we have a history. We have a lot of grievances over the U.S. policies in the past towards Iran. We have mentioned that before and have said that we need to address that. We have given America no grievance. We have not, in fact, resorted to similar acts towards America. So if we can understand this, perhaps we can be more hopeful about a better future in our relations. Those who feel a loss over policy, specifically if there is a history behind it, approach the subject of renewed ties with some pessimism and are less likely to accept the risks of a renewed relations unless deep questions are addressed. I believe, though, that in the last period of the presidency, lots of positive steps were taken. Explicitly, it was stated that the United States had made mistakes in its relations with Iran, and it was said that in 1953, it was admitted that the United States did, in fact, engage directly in creating a coup in Iran in 1953, as well as other interventions. We welcomed those statements, and that was very positive. But when it comes to practice, we have to feel basic changes based on these very statements. What matters now is to take strong steps. It is natural that Iran has its own vital interests, its own national interests, and it demands that those who want to have ties with it should accept these principles. One-way accusations, ambiguous accusations based on no evidences, being too harsh on each other in a very strange way will not benefit anyone. I just want to tell you that for economic and technical reasons, the easiest, fastest, most secure route to take energy from Central Asia to Europe is through Iran, for example. But there is a prejudice that is based on unrealistic expectations to prevent Iran from becoming a major route. And it is the United States and the West that will finally not benefit from these kind of policies. When it comes to the Middle East, you see, actually, more than Americans and more than anybody else in the world, we want to see peace in the Middle East because crisis in the Middle East will affect us first and foremost. But the question is, how do we create peace? You can't pull out millions of people from their homeland and not even allow them to return, or, under the pretext of terrorism, bear witness to the killing of innocent people every day in Palestine by Israeli troops, and at the same time demand peace. We, too, again I stress, want to see peace in the Middle East. But the first prerequisite for peace is to restore the rights of the people who have that territory, including Christians and Jews. This we need to recognize. If we take this recognition seriously, I believe peace will also be restored in the Middle East.
You have influence. You believe in dialogue. This would be an opportunity where the United States and Iran could cooperate to benefit the region and the world. But you have to talk. You have to have a relationship. Then you can influence for the good of the Palestinian people, Israeli people, with respect.
گفتم شرط گفتگو پذیرش طرف دیگر است و احترام به اوست.
For talking is to accept the other person as long as the other party is being accused on ambiguous terms and pressurized because of those ambiguous pressures and terms. We cannot achieve much, but I hope that we can, in fact, crystallize further talks so in the benefit and interest of both nations.
The effort some believe that there has been this positive development. Terrorism has always been an issue between the United States and its perception of terrorism. The State Department has your government on a list of terrorist nations, the State Department. On the other hand, the Bush administration specifically did not include two organizations you support on the list of organizations that it froze the assets. I mean the Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas. That seems to indicate they're sensitive to you and your government and respect your relationships.
ببینید مشکل ما همین است که
Our problem is that without recognizing the facts, we hold on to some perceptions and then try to force those perceptions on the world. We are one of the first victims of terrorism ourselves. In one day alone, we lost over 70 people of our statesmen to terrorism. On one day, our president and prime minister became victims of terrorism. They were killed by terrorists. We lost people in central parts of our towns and places. We see similar acts of terrorism today in Iran. And for many years, we have been talking about the danger of terrorism. Unfortunately, those who resort to terrorism are not being pressured. Rather, they're being supported in various forms. They can move freely and act freely in some areas. And at the same time, some people attack Iran but without forgetting that Iran itself has been victimized. So why does the United States believe that it has the right to define terrorism in a one-sided way, to accept certain facts about it but forget about other facts? I am telling you directly that whatever act that leads to the suffering and the killing of innocent people is terrorism, wherever it may happen, by whomever, whether by the government, by the state, or by groups. One must fight all these in a multifaceted way. However, when it comes to Palestine, these days we're witnessing that regardless of previous agreements, Israeli troops enter areas belonging to the Palestinian Self-Ruling Authority, and we see that many people are being killed. At the same time, some bluntly express that they're after statesmen or people with political authority to gun them down or to kill them. I mean, this is very blunt and clear. The groups that you named, first of all, these are groups who are standing against occupation. No doubt, they should also accept certain rules in order not to endanger the lives of civilians, of innocent civilians. We have no organic ties with these groups, but we defend any oppressed person, any oppressed entity who is trying to restore his or her own right, but we have no direct ties with these groups. You're saying that people talk about Hezbollah. Who is Hezbollah? Hezbollah is the result of the occupation of southern Lebanon by Israel. It is the entity that stood against this occupation. And it was the only entity that the first time pressurized Israel enough to lead to Israeli withdrawal from some parts of the occupied territories. Now they're creating some problems. So this is why I'm saying we need to define terrorism properly. We need to define what we mean by legitimately supporting victims of terrorism and by what we mean when we want to combat terrorism. Only by moving in these two directions can we move towards peace, and a kind of peace based on justice.
But terrorism has been inflicted on lots of people, and you're speaking out against it, but innocent people have been killed and innocent civilians, and you have defined whenever that happens as an act of terrorism, when civilians are specifically attacked as an act of terrorism, which you are against. Does, in your judgment, Iran support terrorism anywhere? Is any group that Iran provides funds for engage in terrorism, as you have defined it this morning?
به هیچ وجه چنین چیزی واقعیت نداره. منم عرض کردم
This thing is not true. I have said that we sympathize with groups who try to liberate their land, and I've also said that we have no organic ties with groups that want to liberate their land. But I want to say that, again, every day there are people who resort to terrorism. They come out with declarations for terrorism, resort to acts of terrorism, and we're telling them that we're telling you that many of these groups can freely engage in these acts in Western countries. Not only that, they're given facilities by Western countries to engage in these acts. Therefore, I hope that we can combat terrorism in all its forms so that finally the globe will be free of it.
Sounds like a great reason to have a better relationship with the United States between two great countries. You are the envy of American politicians, because you were elected in 1997 to the surprise of many. And then in 2001, you were reelected with a huge majority. Is the reforms that you advocate, are they happening? Is Iran moving in reform to a just society, a civil society, and a society that respects free expression?
هر حرکتی رو در هر کشوری با شرایط و ضوابط تاریخیش باید در نظر
You have to
گرفت.
judge every movement in any country based on historical issues and facts and the background of that country.
ناچارم که در این زمینه
I have to explain this a little further. For at least the last 100 years, our nation has been fighting to achieve three goals. One is freedom, one is independence, and the third is development. The current generation in the United States may not know what independence means, but your fathers understood what that meant. It was a great act of independence in the United States that led to a powerful system in this country and actually led to encourage many other freedom-fighting movements across the globe. But we have been witnessed and felt in our bones what occupation by foreign forces mean, what involvement and intervention means, and this is why we want independence. We've also witnessed it in the Middle East. At the same time, we want freedom, meaning freedom for the people to express what form of government they want, what form of administration they want. And perhaps among the Eastern countries, we have been one of the first countries that embarked on a constitutional movement. We actually were able to limit the powers of the monarchy through our constitutional revolution. The nation of Iran is a great nation. It has a great civilization, a lot of great talents. You can see this greatness in the Iranians who live in the United States, who play an important role in politics and the economic development and scientific growth of this country. But unfortunately, because of colonialism, because of autocracy, we're behind, and we've been struggling for the last 100 years. The Islamic Revolution was a turning point in this history. It was the historical will of the people of Iran for freedom, development, and independence based on upholding religious values. So in the Islamic Revolution of Iran, Iranians requested freedom based on religious expressions. And it is for this very reason that in the Islamic Revolution we see a movement towards greater democracy, towards free election, towards participation by the people, and some other progresses made in the technological and scientific fields, or at least those that we hope to have in the future. Therefore, the Islamic Revolution of Iran, in my opinion, formed an important base for growth in our society. The movement continues. We seriously want democracy, and we want to establish it as well as freedom. We also want our independence. We do not want anyone to intervene in our affairs. We want to catch up with the progress in the rest of the world, scientific and technical, that we require for our growth and development. Naturally, we are a kind of country who have been under autocratic rule for many years, as well as colonial rule, and I think that in the last 23 years we have at least moved towards a democratic system based on religious values, but of course in limited ways. We have many problems in many areas, but which society can you name that doesn't have problems and have been able to achieve all its goals overnight? No doubt we're on the move to achieve these goals, and I am confident that our nation will achieve these goals, and they will pay the price for it, but we'll do it proudly.
You will speak eloquently at the United Nations about the future, about the role of the United Nations, about the terrible things about terrorism. Many people believe that you offer great hope. They worry that in your country there is a split between reformists, represented by you, and conservatives who oppose what you want to do. And that concerns many people, that what you want to do will not happen.
I believe that in Iran, there are no serious impediments for achieving our goals, for progress in the areas we want to see. We all believe in our progress, but there are some differences when it comes to modalities for achieving these goals. You may have seen similar situations in Western countries as well. This does not create any serious concern for us. We put forward some plans, the majority votes for it, no doubt a minority has its own opinion, and we try to accommodate all those opinions so that within the framework of our Constitution, we can pave the way for social progress, and on this way learn how to achieve progress while having differences of opinion. What matters to us is the rule of law in our society. Our society is a country that has been affected by both colonialism and autocracy. Following the revolution, we have done well for ourselves in promoting democracy, a democratic system based on the will of the people. So I think that our differences in our points of view, while they do exist, they exist within the framework of law, and we are trying to move within the framework of law so that, God willing, we can continue this process, and it is the Iranian nation that will be the final judge, an enlightened nation that is always present.
Thank you, Mr. President.